Our next speaker is going to be talking about the importance of cross-channel analytics. Just a brief background on who our next presenter will be. He heads heads up the media practice across Southeast Asia, overseeing the work that Millward Brown does in the multimedia campaign evaluation space. And he has been central to the evolution of Millward Brown's cross-media research solution and continues to contribute to the extensive R&D that takes place. Before moving to Singapore, he worked out of the UK office running media projects across Europe for clients, including the soft drink that went chock, 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 that's Coca-Cola, Google, and Visa. Prior to Millward Brown, he worked in media planning at the agency Visium with a focus on online marketing. He studied at the, is that Loughborough? Loughborough University in the UK and Charles University in the Czech Republic, achieving first-class honors degree in communications research. Let's all please give a big round of applause to Rob Valsler. He's the head of media research for Millward Brown. Hey, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is this working? Can you hear? Okay. I don't think. Okay. So I'm that horrible term, a digital native. I started my career in marketing, planning search campaigns, which I think we covered extensively yesterday. But in my current role, it's incumbent upon me to be platform neutral and media neutral, so traditional and digital. We have to look at these media with an even hand. So I find myself sometimes in a tricky position where I'm a kind of skeptical enthusiast. I'm the guy that kind of wants everything, all the new ideas to be really great and come through great in our research, but at the same time I'm the guy that has to go, well, you know, it's not all going to work inevitably in this new emerging space. So yeah, I'm either an enthusiastic skeptic or a skeptical enthusiast, depending on how you like it. And so far today, compared to yesterday, I feel that I'm actually going to say a lot of things that agree with my fellow speakers. Yesterday I kept having that feeling where you're like, this tomorrow could go a little bit downhill if we have to have these conversations about digital being a world of its own and performance metrics and those kind of things. And the speakers today are very much seem to be more aligned. That makes my life a little bit easier and the questions perhaps a little bit easier, but it would also have been good to have that debate with some of the speakers yesterday who are so keen on digital metrics. Okay, so Millward Brown is a huge, for those that don't know, Millward Brown is a huge research agency. We work with the biggest brands across the globe. And we work in this, again, world of advertising and brands, not in the world associated alone with digital, but as you can see from some of the numbers on this infographic, we've actually, as part of this overarching kind of reason to exist, we've measured 7,000 digital campaigns. So it's not an area we're unfamiliar with, but we follow the spend, which we'll come on to in a minute, and we are, you know, more often than not looking at big TV campaigns supported by other media channels. So that's where we're coming at it, and it's all about the brand. It's all about, for those of you that read our annual reports on the value of brands, you know, which brand is most worth most to its company's share price, the brand Z stuff, everything that we're looking at is how do we build a brand? How do we build a brand that imparts value on a product that's greater than the sum of the parts it takes to build that product, whether that's a product or a service? The same applies. The intangible asset of a brand, which is essentially why our industry exists. That is what we hope to measure. It's not who responds to a coupon. Okay, so today, 3 key areas. Firstly, I'm going to try and justify the need for multimedia measurement. It's kind of why I have to make the case internally, why I should have a job. So essentially that's the first part. But I think a lot of great work was done by Joe earlier. It's very rare that you'll get 2 competitors. Essentially, Comscore is a competitor for part of the work we do, but they have a whole load of other areas that they work in that we don't play in, and vice versa. But it's very rare that you'll have 2 people in a competitive sense, both singing from the same hymn sheet and saying the same thing. So, again, I will sound a bit like I'm treading over some old ground with what Joe had said, but I think for the guys that are looking at this outside of research should be thinking, hang on, these guys are both saying the same thing, and they're doing independent research, and they've got agendas that are completely separate. that something must be true in there if they're both coming at it in the same way. So I'll make that case, and I'll try not to labour it for too long. And then we'll talk more about the actual measurements. So firstly, we have to measure the delivery of the campaign, who's exposed, who actually saw the ad, and then we have to look at the brand impact. So the delivery is fundamental in order to be able to measure brand impact, but the brand impact is the bit that we like. It's the bit that we love. Okay, so multi-channel advertising, multi-channel measurement. There's two ways to start any presentation about multi-channel measurement and the huge ecosystem that we face today in the industry. Firstly, you can create a straw man or a reductio ad absurdum. So you can say, look, in the 1980s, there were 5 channels. Whereas in 2009, so a few years ago now, look at all of this proliferation of channels. Isn't it complicated? And straw man and reductio ad absurdum are argumentation techniques where you say, here's a really simple argument, and here's a really complicated argument, and a complicated argument wins. So we're saying, in 1980 there were 5 channels, and today there are a huge proliferation of channels. Hold that thought. I'm not convinced. The second option to start a presentation such as this is this, which I learned yesterday is called a Lumiscape. I didn't know that, but it is. This is the scare slide. You go, forget yesterday, just look how complicated it is today. It doesn't really matter how relevant any of these logos are. It doesn't matter whether you need to think about all of these elements every time you try and do a campaign. It just matters that there's lots of them. And it matters that it kind of looks a bit daunting, and you have to understand all of this to do anything. So again, I'm not so convinced that's how you need to start a presentation. I'm not convinced that this is the landscape that most people confront on a day-to-day basis interacting with digital advertising. So what I've done is created an ecosystem for 1950s advertising that has loads and loads of channels. So this is before the 80s where they just had 5 apparently. But what we have here is magazines, posters, TV, radio. TV's the new media here. It's kind of, people aren't sure about it, but you've got a load of channels. You've got cigarette cards, which were huge. It's a different world, but it's a very complicated environment. I think sometimes we can kind of patronize, or I don't know if patronize is the right word, it's the opposite really. We can condescend our predecessors by going, yesterday someone said, how do people starting out in the industry today handle this? They come in and they've got this whole world. The guys starting out their careers in this age didn't have it easy. They had to get their head around a whole industry. The industry's moved on, but the way in which we're connected and the way in which we learn about how things work is much easier. So maybe today they have it easier. I don't know. You can be the judge. The other version, I guess, is the ecosystem, the Lumiscape of 1950s magazines. How did they ever plan which titles to be in? It was so complicated. You had all of these different women's magazines, current affairs. You can see the point, is that there's no point in starting the process of trying to measure multimedia campaigns or even trying to consider multimedia planning if you're going to start off by going, it's just too hard, it's just too different, it's just too complicated. Now, online is different, online is important, it's a huge development, but I just want to start with that reality check to say that this is where we are, this is where we're coming from. So today, we have a more connected world. We have a world where there's all these devices and ways in which people can absorb content, and conversely, ways in which people can present content, present advertising around that content. This isn't an unusual futuristic picture anymore. This is what happens. This is what happens in all of our homes. And increasingly a larger proportion of society and proportion of market have these experiences. And just one slide where I'm going to flash back again, just to be a bit stubborn and pedantic. But this was the 1950s again. I don't know, I don't have a thing about the 50s, but it makes a good point. That, yes, TV is important. People sat a lot closer to the TV. That's why the old guys wear glasses. But there's another media channel that inconveniently makes its presence known in this picture. And the idea that we used to all sit and watch TV and that was the only media we consumed, it's not helpful, accurate, or instructive on how to measure anything. So that's the last I'll talk about the 50s. Or is it? But online's important. This is the time spent globally by a media channel among internet users. It's already bigger part of our lives than print and radio. Not as big as TV, but it's still there. This is very much aligned with the slides that we saw earlier. In Southeast Asia, amongst the internet users, it's actually a larger proportion of our day is spent consuming online content and using online connected devices. So this is the behavior of consumers. How does it compare to spend? So this shows ad spend over time. Online is the area at the top here. And it's projecting into the future as well as the last few years. Globally, online ad spend is growing hugely. It's growing to a point predicted in the next 2 years to be 23% of overall ad spend. And what we see is that this is generally at the expense of print-based media. It's generally not at the expense of TV, which is very interesting and probably good with ABS-CBN involved. So this we don't see being eaten away at. In Southeast Asia, it looks a bit different. It's still the area at the top. You just can't quite see it as well. But it's growing. It's growing hugely year on year. TV is actually growing. So this, again, will come right at the end of the presentation onto some things about TV, which are more interesting about the investment levels. But it's certainly not at the expense of TV that online's growing. The problem with this area on the chart is it kind of hides the rate of growth just because it is a relatively small numbers, around that 2% level that Joe talked about. But when we look year on year, how much more spend is there in 1 year versus the last year? First thing, both globally and in Southeast Asia, right away through the financial crisis, we see more money each year. That isn't the case for any other media channel. So that for a start, is quite impressive across a global recession. But we do see growth year on year. And when we compare the rate of growth in Southeast Asia to the global rate, it is higher considerably every year, several times higher. So whilst you see that thin wedge at the top of the Southeast Asia media spend chart, we're going digital faster. We're going digital faster than the rest of the world, and inevitably we will catch up. But we have this contradiction or conflict where we've got 29% of people's time being devoted to online activities, but only 19% of media spend. This is what I had the term yesterday, confidence gap. And why aren't we confident enough to align these? It should conceptually be aligned. We should be spending a proportionate amount of money to how much time someone spends there to address messages to them. And the problem is this. Online channels, digital media, by definition, are digital. They produce binary information, which makes aggregating these zeros and ones into metrics incredibly easy. So online has gone about the process of creating metrics using these numbers that autonomously come out of campaigns, websites, ad servers, and so on, and shaping these into metrics that they have some meaning. Other media don't do this. They've never intended to. They've never aspired to. And I guess, again, a difference between yesterday is that I don't think they will aspire to this. They'll become more digital, but they won't aspire to create these metrics. And there's good reasons for that. Essentially, creating your own metrics in your own industry is valuing what you can measure rather than measuring what you value. I'll say that again. It's valuing what you're able to measure easily rather than measuring what you really value strongly. And that, from my perspective, has been the biggest barrier to spend being moved into digital media channels. The analogy I draw here is a story about there's a drunk guy and is in the street light searching for something on the floor. Passerby comes along and said, what's up? Can I help you look? He's like, yeah, I dropped my keys here somewhere. And the guy says, all right, I'll help you look. Whereabouts did you drop them? He said, oh, over there. And the guy's, well, why are you looking around here under the street light? And the guy says, well, the light's better here. And I can't help thinking that that's kind of what we did in digital. And I'm guilty of it myself. I'm a digital native, I said. We looked where the light was brightest and it was easiest to search. But what we were trying to find was never there. We never wanted to measure clicks. It didn't make sense. As Joe said, most people are exposed to adverts, never click. So TV never aspired to create metrics like this. TV wanted to know the impact that a campaign would have on brand perceptions and longer term value. We don't evaluate every press ad on whether you take the coupon, because guess what? They don't have coupons on most press ads. They're not trying to do that, otherwise they would. So we came up with measures out of computers that undermined us. We came out with incredibly small numbers for these metrics that we tried to place this value on. This is the bit in Terminator where the machines start fighting other machines. We built this to be able to answer all our questions, and it turned around and started giving us problems, like the fact that 0.2% of people seeing an online ad will click on it. And varying by different types of research, because it's harder to research, there's only a certain proportion of people that will ever click on an ad. People aren't there to click on ads, they're there for the content. Just like in a magazine, or in a newspaper, or during TV, you're there for the content. The advertising is the process that funds that. You have a commercial contract, implicit commercial contract in content, where a viewer accepts advertising because it funds the existence of that contract. That's what happens in commercial TV, and that's what happens everywhere else. They don't click on it. So we created these metrics, which were problematic. Meanwhile, we were comparing apples to oranges. Apologies for the tired metaphor, but it's instructive here. We were comparing, or trying to compare, we were trying to eat into this spend by who were looking at reach and frequency, GRPs, brand impact, by speaking a different language to those guys, to the marketing, the multidiscipline marketers, the people who hold the real budgets. And we were saying, yeah, but look how many impressions we've got. This campaign has a great click-through rate. It's cheap for 1,000 impressions. Or look what you can do online after you've seen the ad and attribute it back. The illusion of attribution is a separate issue that I can talk on at length some other time. But here we see that we're talking different languages and we're trying to get to the same goal. We're trying to get investment, and we're trying to compare and influence people's decisions and so on. All of the objectives are the same, but the measurement is different. So what we need to do, and the purpose of this presentation, is to say, how do we get this? And how do we get a consistent measure across TV and online? But it's never just been about TV. It's never about TV and online now. It's about all of the media that are involved in multimedia campaigns. So how do we get this consistent measurement across media? That's the key. And that is the only way that the budgets will flow. If we talk about amazing apps, that's great. We'll get app budgets. And if we talk amazing integrated rich campaigns that are online only, that's great. We will get budgets to produce these niche activities. But we will not see the overall share of spend change until we speak the language of normal marketers. So hopefully that's made a little bit of the case of why we need to do this multi-channel measurement. But the next question is obviously how. Now the first step is, as I mentioned at the start, campaign delivery. We need to understand who was exposed to the advertising. Now, there's an easy way. We can say, have you seen this ad? We can say, have you seen any advertising for this brand? That's an option. It's a pretty hard question, though. Most estimates put it at about 5,000 ads that a person in an urban environment globally would see in an individual day. We not only want them to pick out the advertising for a certain brand, we want to make sure it's the advert that we're talking about from the campaign we're talking about. We know that some campaigns will live longer in the memory of consumers. So when they say, yeah, I've seen that ad for Coke, how do we know it wasn't the Christmas ad from 3 years ago that was really great and you know, everybody still talks about? So this kind of question around have you seen the ad is problematic from an accuracy point of view. I said I wasn't going to talk about the 50s anymore, but I did lie. This is a guy from the 1950s called Rosser Reeves. He was one of the inspirations for the Mad Men series, although I don't think it was Don Draper by the looks of things, but you never know. In the 50s, he used to show his clients how effective his advertising was by getting a group of people who recognized the ad and a group of people who didn't recognize the ad and comparing their brand favorability, how into the brand they were, how strong an opinion they had of the brand. And the people who recognized the ad had much higher favorability. And he's going, well, look at the great ads I'm making for you. Isn't that great? You know, pay me some more money and I'll produce even more advertising that shows this. But it was a logical fallacy. And in Millward Brown, we called it the Rosser Reeves fallacy. That he misstate cause and effect. The recognizers were recognizers because they were into the brand. So if we ask someone, have you seen this ad? McDonald's ads in this case, and people who say yes and no. This is the guy that says yes, I've seen the ad. This is the guy that says no, I haven't seen the ad. And guess what? They're both TV viewers and they were both equally exposed to the ad. So it's not particularly instructive either of the reach of the ad or, if, as we will come on to in the next section, if you want to take that forward into looking at brand impact, because guess what? The ad was great. People love the brand. They're both TV viewers. They both have equal exposure. And so what do we need instead of this? We need to measure opportunity to see. We need to measure people's exposure. I could go into a lot of detail about how we do this at Millward Brown, but suffice to say we use detailed campaign reports and media reports that are produced anyway, and we overlay that with detailed media consumption questions from market research respondents. But OTS is the key. What we're striving for is a measurement of how many times somebody was exposed to the advertising that is media neutral, it's agnostic of predisposition and brand size, and it's really measuring what you spend. Again, in other situations we've talked about how you could buy a newspaper ad and you could never read the right page. You still paid. You could, you know, during a TV ad break, you could go up and make a coffee. You still paid for it. It doesn't matter. And if that is a big problem, just like ad visibility is a huge potential issue for the industry, that will come through in the per exposure impact of that advertising, because an exposure won't mean a guaranteed eyeballs, but you can't pay for guaranteed eyeballs. And that's why, again, old and new, not so different. We're talking about ad visibility, and a lot of the terminology around that. People talk about below the fold on a website, which means when you have to scroll down, you know, that line is the fold line. Strange analogy, but the real reason for that is that it comes from newspapers, where you used to fold a newspaper, a broadsheet newspaper, and adverts that were below that fold were cheaper than the ones that were above it. It's the old world in the new world. It's the same concepts and the same things that are happening, but we have to measure the spend, we have to measure the opportunity to see. So opportunity to see instead of recognition, recall type metrics is great. It gives us the reach, but reach is the kind of proxy that recognition and recall allude to. It's essentially, you know, yes, no, what percentage of the audience were exposed. To go beyond that, what the real benefits of opportunity to see measurement are, so you get frequency. So not just was this person exposed or not, but how exposed were they? How many times? And how many times was optimal? How many times did we want to expose them? How many times until they kind of got the message and had a diminishing return? And the other part that we get from this is duplication. So by a richer understanding of a respondent level exposure, we get to see how people are overlapped. They're exposed to more than one media. And that's really key. Again, frequency and duplication are really important to carry forward into the aspiration to measure brand impact. And that's the next stage, really. So once we've got these metrics around reach, frequency, duplication of the different channels, we really want to know what. So what was the impact of that exposure? And brand impact, just to define it, just to make that clear, is that we've talked a lot about performance marketing yesterday, and it's been alluded to in a few of the presentations today. Performance marketing is by definition looking for an immediate short-term return on sales. Marketing activities, someone clicks, does something, we attribute it to that media, and it drives a sale or an action or something immediate. That's great. That's an aspiration of marketing activity. It's not where the media spend globally is going on. It's going on brand building for the obvious reasons that this activity that drives meaningfully different brand impressions and brand engagement contributes to sales and builds brands that are stronger in the longer term. But any study of the last 30, 40, 50 years that has looked at the immediate return on a TV campaign has found that it's below $1 per dollar spent. As in, it doesn't pay off in the short term, but the big advertisers in the world still continue to spend on TV because they understand the longer term value that comes from building a strong brand rather than targeting someone to respond immediately to an advert and rush out and buy something. So traditional media has always been playing in this space. Online has had the ability to do this incredibly well, or say that that was what it's about, and therefore missed out on the dollars here. But when we're talking about brand impact of Millward Brown, we tend to be talking about this. The sales will come from this long-term brand building efforts. This is not really an argument. It's pretty much, again, the reason for why TV ads and multimedia campaigns look the way they do. Now, the online, again, just to labour the point, there is a disconnect here. From the surveys we've done, 60% of spend is on brand building rather than direct response campaigns. 60% of the budgets are going online are going towards ads that you don't need to click on, you don't need to do anything because they just want to give you a message, just like a magazine ad, just like a TV ad. It may even be the same broad campaign that's being delivered. The aspiration is to change your brand perceptions, not to trigger you. Meanwhile, again, going to the marketers that we've surveyed, they're still optimizing this 60% of brand campaigns using click-through rates and clickstream metrics. So they're measuring it based on the immediate response that they don't want. They, by definition, they want you to take the message and assimilate that into your understanding of the brand. They don't want you to do something, but they will optimize the campaign and evaluate the performance based on whether you clicked. It doesn't, make sense. Not only is it not an instructive metric, it also shows no correlation. This relationship here is ad awareness against a click log. It's not a Millward Brown study, it's an independent study, but it does show that there's no correlation between whether or not someone clicks on an ad and whether or not they're aware of that ad, whether they recognize it or aware of the content of that ad. So not only is it not an appropriate metric, it's not an instructive metric. So how do we actually measure these, the brand impact? Well, we take this media exposure data that we've covered in the last section, understanding at a respondent level per person, how exposed were they to all of the different media channels, and we overlay that with brand perceptions. And it's at the interface of these two factors that we really understand the relationship between exposure and impact. And unfortunately, it's not easy. It requires complex statistical modeling, and we have to really understand all of the other factors that drive people's brand perceptions. We can't just look for an advertising effect, because then we'll fall into the Rossa Reeves trap, assume that everything is advertising. But it's possible, and it's possible today, it's possible in the Philippines, it's possible, and we're doing it with the biggest advertisers in the market. So what we have to do is produce statistical modeling. It's a scary word, and it's a scary concept. And at this point, the presentation could go one of two ways. I could either talk about regression modeling, propensity weighting, the complexity of trying to disentangle predisposition whilst accurately measuring frequency of potential exposure across a number of different media channels. Or I can show a video of what it looks like once we've done it. So, for your sakes as well as mine, I'll go for the latter. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of the outputs that you get from our particular solution in this space. If you obviously want information on how this works and how it could work for you, then we can talk about that, and I'd be happy to. But what I thought I would share was a few of the more general and aggregated learnings that we've got for cross-media in Southeast Asia. And again, being kind of channel agnostic or neutral, these aren't focused solely around TV, around online, but they do focus on TV to some degree, because the question that implicates online is very often, how do I move money? How do I move money in a scientific or a way that makes me feel comfortable, away from TV, if that's the biggest share of the budget currently, and into other channels, one of which is more often than not digital. So some of these insights are from that perennial question that we're always asked. And the first thing is that TV does reach. In Southeast Asia, TV does reach. Forget about it. If you're trying to deliver reach as a media channel, forget about it. Average across Southeast Asia from the campaigns that we're studying. Again, the campaigns that we're looking at are for the big advertisers. It's by no means the average reach in these channels. It's the average of the studies that we do, but we do see these delivering high reach for TV. Other channels are aligned and they vary between markets and so on. But one of the interesting things is in Indonesia and in the Philippines, where we often have campaigns reaching over 90%, 95% of a target audience, we're still asked outside of TV, what was the incremental reach? And that metric of what did I add in terms of eyeballs by adding an extra channel that I didn't get from TV, when you're talking about 95% reach, kind of becomes a weird metric, because you're saying of the 5% that you left of people that hadn't seen the campaign or been exposed to the campaign, solely on that, how good was this other channel? Which it's bizarre, and we'll come on to some of the other reasons why it's not helpful, but it's also not really achievable as an aspiration. So that's an aside on the reach front, but essentially TV does reach, it does it well, and it will continue to do it well. It will continue to do it better than any other channels for the foreseeable future. But it's not all bad news. Comparing that kind of share of reach or share of exposure So how much of the impact, so this is just 100% of the impact from the different campaigns in different markets, how much of that came from TV or from TV only? And we see that compared to that huge reach, it's not always the only media having an impact. It's not always responsible for all of the brand impact that we see. And other channels and combinations of channels are incredibly impactful for the share of spend and the share of reach that they actually receive. So TV is big, it's strong, it's impactful. In our experience, it's not seen as lean, fit, efficient. They're not the verbs that you would perhaps use. It's the always on or the essential first media down, but it's not necessarily the top performer in efficiency speak. The other thing that we see, again, going back to the idea of this incremental reach, what did I add? What new people did I add? How much outside of TV did I produce by adding other media channels? That's the tip of the iceberg. And it's the overlap part that we really need to talk about the benefits of multimedia advertising. It's the people that see campaigns in more than one place that get a bonus effect, a synergistic media multiplier effect that is greater than the sum of the individual parts. This is really where the magic happens, and the idea that you would evaluate a campaign based on the tip of the iceberg for the other media is really missing the point. Not only is that overlap portion of reach impactful in a new way that isn't possible through individual media, it's also hitting the lighter viewers of TV, and it's hitting them in a favourable way to elevate their exposure levels. And we see that across Southeast Asia, across APAC, these multiplicative synergies, it's a fancy word, but it's essentially that overlap part where it's greater than the individual parts, accounts for over a third of overall campaign effects. Again, these campaigns are heavily TV focused in terms of spend, but we see over a third coming from multimedia synergies. Solus media effects are solus media effects across all channels, but it's the effects that would happen independently of one another. The multiplicative synergies are when 1 on 1 equals 3. These people that are having these effects get the individual effects and an additional bonus effect, if you like. One final slide on this, and then I'm done. Here we're looking at the investment, in this case in TV, and how much impact it had on a particular metric. So 100% is the final impact that we saw. And then what we've labelled here is a total campaign effect. And what we're able to do, again, the benefits of having a statistical model rather than a static set of results is that you can play with things. You can actually say, well, what if they spent more? So we've got the rest of this axis to say, okay, let's increase the TV investment. What's the relationship between impact and investment? And at what point can you increase TV investment to such a point that the impact is the same as the overall campaign? So can you replicate a multimedia effect through TV? Well, the answer is yes. You can get in this case it was TV and online were involved, so that again is more relevant to today. But you can replicate the effect of the online added by increasing TV spend. I guess the headline though is that in this case it would cost an additional 45% of the original TV budget to replicate that effect. To get what you got from running a multimedia campaign through one channel, you would have had to have spent that extra 45%. Needless to say, the TV budget or the investment in online and other channels was not 45% of the TV budget, and again, it rarely is at this stage. So there is a value, there is a commercial value, there is a return on investment saving through multimedia channels. And this is an example, but it's by no means cherry-picked. It's by no means the exception to the trends that we see across the specific campaign research that we do. Okay, so I hope that I've shown some interesting slides on research, which is a challenge in and of itself, but also that it's kind of shown that this is possible. This multimedia measurement dream or aspiration is something that's taken place today in the Philippines now. We can do it. We don't have to worry about transferable metrics. It's done. We can measure it. Hopefully that will change the way the industry thinks and plans, multimedia campaigns, and therefore the budgets will start to reflect the opportunity represented by non-TV media, and so on. Thank you.
Rob, just maybe a few quick questions.
The red
Also,
check.
especially if our audience also may want to ask some questions. That's one of the things that challenged me in university, statistics. I used to dread that course.
Okay.
You reminded me all the more why I dreaded it.
I'm sorry if it was painful. Flashbacks.
Yes, it does.
Lectures.
It's Flashback Friday on Instagram. So let's see. Cross-channel analytics. Essentially, for a digital marketer to be able to use that cross-channel analytics, you'll have to get the data to analyze in the first place. What would be the challenges to actually getting the data you need to be able to conduct cross-channel analytics?
Really, the challenges aren't very big. We need visibility of the campaign in advance of it starting. We're often asked about running some research at the end of the campaign or partway through, but it has to be designed up front and it has to be in place beforehand. But in terms of the multi-channel aspect to it, really that just comes from a collaboration with media agencies who produce a lot of this data independently themselves, and we're just taking that on, we're repurposing it for a market research purpose and delivering these kind of insights. So we don't find there's a particular pain point in terms of getting the data we need, provided that it's part of the campaign planning. The idea of measurement is right there at the beginning of the design.
But does it also involve having to track how, say, a particular consumer would react, say, to different marketing or different advertising strategies on each of these channels? You'll have to track their movements.
Yes, so we'll ask them about their behavior. For online, we also have the benefit of cookie data, but we're not a hostage to cookie data. We also ask them about behaviors as well. And then from the information that we can get on the campaign, we can overlay that to see their exposure, as you say, and that's really important to then say, well, what was the effect on their brand perception? So we are looking at both simultaneously, and we're measuring that throughout the whole campaign, so we pick up on all of the different activities as and when they're live. But it is focused on one campaign, and it's focused on one brand, and that's really how we approach that.
And then Leia, of course, was saying that for the past 5 years, she was already saying, this year, we're going digital. And then the next year, saying it again. I think you also commented on that somehow, that every year seems to be the year we'll go digital, and somehow it doesn't happen. Where does cross-channel analytics begin to happen if digital doesn't happen in the first place?
So that's a good point. In Southeast Asia or across AMAP, by far the main reason for running these studies is because there's a move to digital and there's a nervousness or a lack of data, a lack of understanding. So that move to digital triggers a cross-channel approach, but by no means globally is online or digital the reason for cross-channel analytics or cross-media research. In our case, we've done very many campaigns that haven't included online, and that's still important to have that real attribution of effect across the different media. But online will grow and continues to grow based on its own performance and its own metrics. That is something that will happen, but it will happen in a world in and of itself with niche activities and bespoke builds, rather than tapping into multimedia campaign budgets, which by definition are much bigger and much more transferable across brands and channels.
And in the course of doing my own pre-forum analytics on the resource speakers, I resorted to the best analytical tool I had, which is Google, and I Googled your name.
Okay.
And I came up with this article where you actually posted a comment, and I think you were arguing with that guy, I can't remember his name, where he premised that digital marketing was actually falling behind because TV advertising is still the best way to reach your consumer audience.
Yeah.
And you posted a comment and said, you're absolutely wrong.
Okay.
Or something to that effect. Not in those words.
Yeah, being argumentative does sound a bit like me. I can't recall the exact quote, but
I think it was posted somewhere in the beginning of this year.
yeah. So TV it depends on the market hugely. Firstly, we see faster pace of change or movement away from TV in other markets, but in Southeast Asia, a lot, as you see, the spend is increasing, and actually it's still an incredibly strong way to reach an audience.
Yeah.
But what we see at the same time is this adding of video channels which aren't TV based, which is part of the conversation that kicked off the day. Is video transcends devices to some degree, and I think often the case that we're making for online video rather than broad speaking online is that there's a movement towards watching videos on other devices, and if we think about video as TV, then we're kind of missing the emerging trend. 50% of YouTube views take place on mobiles in Singapore, more than 50% now. Globally, 25% of video views take place on mobiles. People are consuming content more. As you see, the hours of TV don't necessarily change, but people are consuming more content as a net sum. So I think there are opportunities to get reach from a number of other sources, but while the investment continues to be skewed, then the results and the opportunity will continue to favour TV. For example, Facebook is often talked about, and as a media buyer, historically, it's kind of obvious to me that Facebook isn't about apps or fan pages. They're great and they should be used to their fullest, but Facebook's a reach medium. By definition, it has huge reach. It's it's most of the web in most markets. And what I mean by that is it almost has 100% of online users are on Facebook, and as online usership in markets grows, it's a way of reaching a very large audience. It's also a way of targeting incredibly narrowly and using all of those zeros and ones to pick people out or feel like you're picking people out accurately. But really, if I was buying media still, that's a reach medium. It's not as strong as TV yet, or in some markets, but it's a way of reaching everyone. And I think the opportunity kind of clouds that somewhat sometimes because of the zeros and ones that are available.
Oh, just like the Matrix, right?
Yeah,
All I see of you are zeros and ones. Any questions from the audience out there? Yes, sir.
Morning. Bingo Soriano from Snapworks. Very interesting point about you premised that TV is the most powerful in terms of reach. And yet, and your studies have been revolving on that premise. And yet we've seen, not necessarily campaigns, but content, or some videos, or even not unknown personalities who suddenly had 1 billion likes or views on YouTube, for example, out of nowhere, without using TV at all, without spending a single dime, but reaching much more than TV. So have you done a study the other way around, wherein something came out of online and then enhanced by TV later on?
There are lots of examples of that. Viral videos, and not just viral videos, but viral content as well. I guess the approach of cross media is to measure media spend and marketing budgets, and the 90% of marketing spend, regardless of discipline, goes on media. It goes on showing the ads to people. So we follow that spend. We follow that, and we measure that on behalf of our clients. Viral videos are incredibly, they're a great factor when they work, but as an aspiration, I think we've spent there are people that have spent the last 5 years trying to make viral videos with a 1% success rate or something like that, where you have an idea that would feel like it's viral. I challenge anyone to be able to identify viral videos before they're viral, because it's not possible. With at Millward Brown, we've done a lot of studies on the indicators of viral video success, but that's by no means the case that we can pick a winner. If you can pick a winner, don't tell anyone. You can make a lot of money doing it. But viral videos and online buzz that spreads in a viral fashion and gains great traction is a great aspiration, but it will remain a smaller part of the spend and the overall investment across spend, time and energy of the industry. But there are also campaigns that look like one media and are another media. So there are campaigns that look like out-of-home campaigns because someone built a bespoke billboard, covered it in post-it notes, and you walked up and you took the post-it note and you got some kind of coupon or message, and it was great and it was interactive. That looks like an outdoor campaign, but it's not an outdoor campaign. It's content for other marketing channels. We see that with some of Coke activities. Coke are a huge client of ours, but often you see their marketing activities that looks like incredibly localized, like a vending machine that does something interesting. Now that's great, but it's never supposed to impact only the people that interfaced with that machine. It's designed to produce a video which they hope will be inherently shareable, and they'll have a viral video success. But the news coming out of Google and YouTube is that in reality there's no real commercial way of ensuring viral video success without paid support. So you can help fund a viral. You can help get to that point of inflection where you've hit critical mass. But it's very hard to do it without any paid dollars. So hopefully that's an answer.
All right, I'm looking at the big screen, and I think this question could apply to you. From Butch Royce, what measure do you think is critical for a life insurance campaign? On Facebook, we have 70,000 fans, but generate minimal sales.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you attribute the sales to Facebook, because 70...
Attribution to
Facebook. Yeah, so firstly, 70,000 fans for life insurance is great. Whoever has that, well done. And that shows with Facebook just how the right strategies, which again, with fan pages, we can evaluate those in and of themselves in terms of how they can be optimized and generate the best return for that small segment of your audience who are hugely predisposed to you. It's where your sales already come from. The reason why perhaps the fans aren't generating the sales is that the reason why I'd be a fan of a life insurance company is if I had some involvement with them. So they may already be customers, and what you're looking at is a retention channel rather than an acquisition channel. That's just a hypothesis. But the other thing is, if you're looking for an online clickstream attributable definition of sales or return on your Facebook investment, you're probably not doing justice to what that activity is giving you. People may be building a warmth and an association for the brand, and their friends may be seeing that, which you can't immediately attribute to an individual sale any more than you can a TV ad or radio ad or print ad that doesn't have a direct response tag, so a unique phone number or a coupon or a unique URL that can be traced back. Most of your brand building activity won't be able to be traced back, and a fan page is the ultimate brand activity because you're only building brand. And obviously CRM is huge on fan pages, and in some cases the primary reason for being there.
Now, well, hopefully I don't think Butch Royce was referring to something like Prudential Life, because they may have 70,000 fans, but they're all crying for their money. So maybe not so. Any more questions? All right, none. Well, Rob, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.